Hi, Robert. Okay, good. We got that done. I want to talk to you just a little bit on the record about homework. And again, I don't want you all to panic about the homework. First of all, let me go over again what I'm really interested in. If it didn't work, why do you think it didn't work? What do you think caused your query not to work? And I'll guarantee you right now, I have worked every problem in the, well, I skipped chapter 13. I worked almost every problem in this book, and they all work. Okay? And sometimes I didn't get them the first time through, but I want you to try. If you think there's information missing, let me know what you think that is. Um, Today in 3D modeling class, one of the guys came up to me, and right now they have to do a bowling alley and have the pins fly off the bowling lane. And the 12 people in the class did a super job, but one guy's pins just didn't go anywhere. They just sat there. And so I said, Sean, why are your pins sitting there? And he said, I have no idea. And I said, well, think about it and go back through and look at it and see if you can tell me why you think it is not working. And if you can figure it out, I'll give you 20 extra bonus points. If you have to ask me, I'll take 5 points away. So he sat there for the entire class, but he figured out what he did wrong. And that's more important to me for you folks to figure out how to solve it. Because when you get out there and start doing this in the, I hate to say real world, but out in the wild, there's not going to be anybody there that's going to say, oh, you do it this way. You're going to have to sit there and figure out how to do it. Yes. Then okay, and that's great. And say I'd really love to answer this question, but you forgot to log that. There's a lot of stuff that didn't load on this, so I'm kind of curious. I'll troubleshoot it when you all are gone. Let me know what you tried to get it to work. And I've got a student in one of my Python classes that comes in and says it doesn't work. Well, what'd you try? Well, I tried a bunch of stuff and it doesn't work. Well, show me. Well, I tried a bunch of stuff. Don't you believe me? So last week I said, no, show it to me. He hasn't been back since to tell me that his stuff doesn't work. So if you try but it doesn't work and you can explain why you tried what you did, that's fantastic. All right? Because especially part of learning Oracle is the thought process that goes into it. And hopefully up to today in week 7, you've realized that the way that we approach a database to get information out of it is a little bit different than the way we do a whole lot of other things. Okay. And really, the chances are, if you can look at that and explain to me what you're trying and why, you're going to get full credit anyway. Because that troubleshooting process is just as important as being able to get it done. I had a guy that worked for me over at Tinker, and he could never write, his name was Chris, and Chris could never write a query to run correctly the first time if I would have promised him, 5 million bags of gold. But he'd come in and he'd say, well, this isn't working. And I'd say, Chris, let's look at it. And I'd say, tell me what you see's wrong the first time. And he'd wait for a while and finally he'd say, oh, I see what it is. And he'd go back and he'd come back and it would run. So please do that. It'll help you out a lot as we go through. And I'll still help you find the right way out if you're just totally, just can't see the forest through the trees. But try it first, please. Okay, if I told you this before, stop me. But when I went out to FAA, the first assignment I got in setting up graphics, I had no clue. I knew what we had done and worked with in the Air Force, and I knew how to do the graphics, but to take it from scratch, I hadn't done in quite a while. And so I sat there and just started experimenting. And that's what I recommend you do. Start to experiment. Okay, any questions on the homework? If you would, please have it in the drop-down box before class next Monday night. And that'll be 5 and 6. Yeah, 6 tonight. Okay. So, when we get into Chapter 6, page 211, thereabouts, depending on what book you have, we're going to look at creating a table tonight. And we've talked about queries so far, and we've skirted around with views and inserts, what we might do to create a table, but tonight we're actually going to get into the code that creates the table. And it's really very, very simple. There's only about 3 things to remember as you go through it. Now, when you first create a table in Oracle, like the slide says, there's no data in it, which means there are no rows in it, which means if you try to run a query against it, nothing's going to happen. You'll get no results. Okay? So, here's the code that we use to build a query. Create table, and then we put a table name in. Don't do like one of my former students did, named all his table name. Thought it was funny. Don't do that. Then we have a parentheses, and then we have our first column name. Remember back early in the semester, we talked about how we've got all kinds of memory space in our computers now. So make your column names, your attribute names descriptive, so you know what they are. Home address, work address, home phone, cell phone, whatever. Now, a little technique that I use, you do not have to use it, but it helps me keep things straight. It is totally permissible to put a space after the column name 1 and type in data type 1, whatever the data type is going to be. What I do is I like to go over 2 or 3 tabs so I can line up all my column names and read them, and I can line up all my data types. It just helps me see the order in the table a little better. So, we create a table name, we select a data type that we're going to use, and then we put a comma after that data type. Hit enter and go down and create the second name, and then the third name, the fourth name, so on. At the very end, we're going to put a closed parentheses, and we're going to put our semicolon. This is Oracle. We end everything with a semicolon. Now, there are a couple of errors that people run into that are common and come up especially in entry SQL classes. The first one is they totally forget the parentheses. So they'll put the create table name and go right to the column name and not put the parentheses in. So that's one problem you want to look out for. Second problem is after the data type, they'll either put a semicolon or they'll forget to put the comma. If you put a semicolon in, Oracle will work, all right, as long as you remember the parentheses, but it'll create a table with one attribute in it. So you want to remember to put commas after all of the data types with the exception of the last column name. All right, we're not going to put one there. And we're going to look at the code in a second. All right, if we can create a table, then we know that we identify the entity instances in our table with primary keys. And so that becomes very important. And there are some things that we need to learn about primary keys working in creating tables. First of all, the easiest way to do a primary key is to create it when the table's created. And you can look in chapter 6 and it'll show you how to do that. But that's the best time to do it because you're not going to forget about it. Although you can go into a table that's already constructed, and as long as the primary key constraints are met, you can create a primary key in that table. So what you would have to have is that your candidate key or the key that you're creating is a unique value to each instance within that table. Okay? So you can do it either way. Again, I don't care if you create them when you create the table or when you after you've created the table. The key is that when you need a primary key, you go ahead and create it. Now, we have something in Oracle that we talk about table or data constraints. And so as an example, if we create a primary key, we create a data constraint. And that constraint says that whatever field we identify as a primary key, that field is going to be unique. So think of your Social Security number or think of your student ID number. As a primary key, it's only assigned to you and it uniquely identifies you. Okay? Were we in a 16-week class, we'd get into a big discussion about that. So maybe we'll do that in the advanced database class. So this is a code off of page 212, and this is how you would create the table that they want you to create 6.01 for foods. So we've got very descriptive attribute names, menu items, supplier ID, product code, description, price, price increase. And we have the data types that we want to use for each one of those. So let's talk about this for a second, and we'll get more into the data types in just a minute. Menu item number is a number. I disagree with that one. We'll come back to it in a second. A varchar2 is a character data type, and they've assigned that to everything else with the exception of price and price increase. Now, look at the data type for price. It's numbers, and when we want to declare a decimal, we put the total places that we're going to have in our number, and then we put how many decimal points there will be from the left side of the value. So if we look at that on the board, the price, we say, is 4 digits long. And our decimal point is 2 digits over from the right side. So it's right there. Okay? If you can remember that, you won't get in trouble with decimals in Oracle. Now, menu item lists as a number, and I have a little problem with that. When I learned Oracle, the way we learned Oracle is if you're not going to add, subtract, multiply, or divide a value, then you don't want to make it a number, you want to make it a varchar or a varchar2. All right? And that just helps things run a little smoother. So again, it's a rule that I go by, but you don't necessarily have to do it, and you'll notice in the textbook they don't follow that rule. But it worked when I learned Oracle and the guy that taught it to me.
So
Grant.
Does menu item not have the capability for decimals since it doesn't specify?
Absolutely correct.
Okay.
Menu item would be can be up to a 2-digit character, so 0 to 99. Okay. Yep. And if you're going to do that, then why not just make it a character varchar? Because you're not going to add the menu item numbers up, but they didn't ask me. All right. This is another thing that you can take a look at, and we talked about it last class. We can look at the columns or the attributes that define our table, and we can look at the data types, we can look at the column IDs, and we can figure out where the primary key is. What's unique about this field, notice there is no primary key. How can we tell that?
It says null. Find your primary key.
It's, well, okay, that's very good. It says null right under primary key. And if we had a primary key there, it would not have null. All right, so it's saying that those values can be null. All right, data types. We're still on page 12, and I'm going to show you the 4 or 5 primary ones that you'll need the most. Okay, and the key to remember here is that when a computer stores data, it stores it in ones and zeros. Okay, and then if you've had Ken Dewey, you've probably seen his joke about there are 10 types of people in the world. If you haven't, go ask him. It'll make him feel